This is the story of Marcus, a single 32-year-old software engineer who thought he was just being a decent neighbor. He had no idea that the stressed woman he defended in the hallway was hiding something massive. And he definitely didn't expect what happened 5 days later when a stranger in a $1,000 suit showed up at his door, confessing feelings Marcus never saw coming. This isn't your typical love story. This is about hidden identities, millionaire secrets, and the moment one act of kindness unraveled everything. Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you speechless. Let me paint you a picture of Marcus Chen's life before everything changed. Marcus lived in apartment 4B of the Riverside Complex, a modest mid-rise building in downtown Seattle. Every morning at 6:30 a.m., his alarm would buzz. He'd make his coffee, throw on his usual outfit, jeans and a hoodie, and settle into his home office for another day of coding. His life was comfortable, predictable, maybe a little lonely, but he'd gotten used to it after his last relationship ended 2 years ago. Marcus was the kind of guy who kept to himself. He'd nod at neighbors in the hallway, hold the elevator door, maybe exchange small talk about the weather. But that was it. He wasn't antisocial. He just valued his routine, his peace and quiet. His apartment was simple. A 1-bedroom with minimal furniture, a gaming setup in the corner, and walls that desperately needed some decoration. His sister kept telling him it looked like a college dorm, but Marcus didn't mind. It was his sanctuary. On weekends, he'd order takeout, binge-watch sci-fi shows, and occasionally meet up with his college buddies for basketball. His life wasn't glamorous, but it was his. Stable, safe, uncomplicated. That is, until apartment 4C got a new tenant 3 months ago. Her name was Riley. Marcus first saw her on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when he was coming back from a coffee run. She was struggling with moving boxes, trying to wedge a large package through her apartment door while balancing a laptop bag on her shoulder. Need some help? Marcus had offered instinctively. Riley looked up, and Marcus noticed 2 things immediately. She had the most intense green eyes he'd ever seen, and she looked absolutely exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing an oversized sweatshirt that had seen better days. "Oh, thank you, but I've got it," she'd said with a tired smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Marcus helped anyway, and Riley reluctantly accepted. They made small talk, the usual "where are you from?" and "what do you do?" questions. Riley was vague about her job, mentioning something about business consulting and working remotely. She seemed nice enough, but there was something guarded about her, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Over the next few months, Marcus would see Riley occasionally in the hallway or the building's gym. She was always polite, but distant. Always looked stressed, always on her phone with what sounded like intense business calls. Marcus heard snippets through the walls sometimes, her voice raised, talking about contracts, deadlines, deals falling through. She kept odd hours too. Marcus would hear her coming home at 2 a.m. sometimes, or leaving before dawn. Whatever she did, it was clearly demanding. Marcus didn't think much of it. Everyone had their struggles. He barely knew her beyond casual hellos. But he couldn't help noticing that, as the weeks passed, Riley looked more and more drained. The dark circles got deeper. She lost weight. The spark in those green eyes dimmed considerably. Something was clearly wrong, but it wasn't Marcus's place to ask. They were just neighbors, nothing more. That changed on a Thursday evening in late October. Marcus was coming home from grocery shopping, arms full of bags, when he heard raised voices echoing through the hallway. He recognized Riley's voice, immediately tense, defensive. As he rounded the corner to their floor, Marcus saw a scene that made his blood run cold. Riley was backed against her apartment door, and a tall, aggressive-looking man in his 40s was standing uncomfortably close to her. He was well-dressed, expensive suit, designer watch, but his body language was all wrong. Threatening, intimidating. "You can't keep avoiding this, Riley," the man was shouting. "Your father sent me here personally. You think you can just run away and hide. You have responsibilities. I told you and my father that I'm done, Richard." Riley's voice was shaking, but firm. "I'm not coming back. I have nothing more to say to either of you." "You're being selfish and childish," Richard spat, moving even closer. "Do you have any idea how much damage you're causing? The company needs you. Your family needs you. You can't just—" That's when Marcus stepped in. "Hey," his voice came out calmer than he felt. "Is there a problem here?" Both Riley and Richard turned to look at him. Riley's face showed a mix of relief and embarrassment. Richard's expression was pure irritation. "This doesn't concern you," Richard said dismissively, barely glancing at Marcus before turning back to Riley. "This is a private family matter." "Doesn't look very private," Marcus replied, setting down his grocery bags. His heart was pounding, but he kept his voice steady. "And the lady clearly wants you to leave." Richard's jaw tightened. He looked Marcus up and down with obvious contempt. "And who exactly are you?" "The building's security guard." "I'm her neighbor," Marcus said simply. "And I'm asking you to step back and leave. Now." For a tense moment, Richard didn't move. The hallway felt charged with potential violence. Marcus wasn't a fighter. The last time he'd been in a physical altercation was in 7th grade, but he stood his ground. Riley spoke up, her voice stronger now. "Marcus is right, Richard. You need to leave. Tell my father I'll call him when I'm ready, and not before." Richard's face flushed red. He looked between them, clearly debating whether to push the issue. Finally, he straightened his tie and stepped back. "This isn't over," he said coldly. "Your father won't tolerate this disrespect much longer, Riley. You're throwing away everything, the company, Your legacy, your future. For what? To play pretend in some cheap apartment. Just leave, Riley repeated quietly. Richard shot one more contemptuous look at Marcus, then turned and stalked toward the elevator. Marcus and Riley stood there in awkward silence until they heard the elevator doors close. Riley let out a long, shaky breath. Thank you. You didn't have to do that. Are you okay? Marcus asked. Should we call the police if this guy is harassing you? No, no police, Riley said quickly, then seemed to catch herself. It's complicated, family stuff. But really, thank you for intervening. That took guts. She looked at Marcus with something new in her eyes, genuine appreciation mixed with something else he couldn't quite read. Guilt, maybe, or fear. If he comes back, let me know, Marcus said. I'm in 4B just. Knock on my door if you need anything, okay? Riley nodded, managing a small but genuine smile. You're a good person, Marcus Chen from 4B. They said goodnight, and Marcus gathered his groceries, his mind racing with questions. Who was Riley, really? What kind of family matter involves being cornered in a hallway by aggressive men in expensive suits? What company? What legacy? But he didn't ask. It wasn't his business. He'd done what any decent person would do, nothing more. Marcus spent the rest of the evening trying to focus on work, but his concentration was shot. He kept replaying the confrontation in his mind. Around 9 p.m., he heard movement in Riley's apartment, normal sounds, TV playing softly. At least she seemed okay. He went to bed that night thinking the whole thing was over. A strange encounter, sure, but resolved. He had no idea that 5 days later, his entire life would flip upside down. Tuesday afternoon, exactly 5 days after the hallway incident, Marcus was deep into debugging code when his doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. Amazon package, maybe. He saved his work and headed to the door, glancing through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway. Tall, probably early 30s, with sleek dark hair pulled back in a professional bun. She wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent and carried a leather portfolio. Everything about her screamed executive power. Marcus opened the door cautiously. Can I help you? The woman smiled, polite, professional, with a hint of warmth. Marcus Chen. My name is Alexis Park. I'm an associate of Riley Morrison from apartment 4C. May I come in? I promise this will only take a few minutes, but what I need to discuss is rather sensitive. Marcus's mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios. Was Riley in trouble? Was this about the incident with Richard? I'd prefer to talk out here, Marcus said carefully. What's this about? Is Riley okay? Alexis nodded, seemingly unsurprised by his caution. Riley is fine. In fact, that's partly what I'm here to discuss. But I really would prefer to speak privately. I understand your hesitation. You don't know me. How about this? She pulled out a business card and handed it to Marcus. He looked at it. Embossed gold lettering on premium cardstock. Alexis Park, Chief Legal Officer, Morrison Dynamics International. Morrison, the same last name as Riley. 5 minutes, Marcus said, stepping aside to let her in. Alexis entered with the practiced grace of someone used to commanding rooms. She glanced around his apartment, taking in the minimal furniture, the gaming setup, the general bachelor aesthetic, without any visible judgment. "Thank you for seeing me," Alexis began, remaining standing despite Marcus gesturing toward his couch. "I'll get straight to the point. I'm here on behalf of Riley Morrison, though she doesn't know I'm having this conversation. What I'm about to tell you is confidential, and I'm trusting that you'll respect that." Marcus crossed his arms, suddenly feeling very out of his depth. "Okay, Riley Morrison is the heir to Morrison Dynamics International, a private equity firm and technology conglomerate worth approximately $3.2 billion. Her father, Jonathan Morrison, founded the company 40 years ago. Riley has been groomed her entire life to take over as CEO. Marcus blinked, then blinked again. "I'm sorry, what?" Alexis continued, as if she was delivering a routine briefing. 6 months ago, Riley walked away from the company. She left her position as COO, moved out of the family estate, and essentially disappeared. She's been living here under somewhat reduced circumstances, trying to find herself and escape the pressure of her family legacy. Marcus's mind was reeling. Riley, his stressed-out neighbor who wore sweatpants and looked like she survived on coffee and anxiety. A billionaire heiress. The man who confronted her last week, Alexis continued, was Richard Sutton, the company's CFO and one of her father's most trusted advisors. He was sent to try to convince Riley to return. Her father and the board are becoming increasingly concerned about the company's leadership succession. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus managed to ask. Alexis's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Because Riley has been talking about you. A lot. According to what she's shared with me, I'm not just her father's attorney. I'm also one of Riley's closest friends. You defending her last week meant more to her than you realize. Anyone would have done the same thing," Marcus said, still trying to process everything. "That's exactly the point," Alexis replied. "In Riley's world, very few people do anything without an agenda. Everyone wants something from her: access, money, influence, connections. But you stepped in without knowing who she was, without expecting anything in return. You treated her like a person, not an asset." Marcus sat down on his couch, suddenly needing to. "Okay, but I still don't understand why you're here." "Because tomorrow," Alexis said, her voice taking on a more serious tone, "Riley is planning to come to your door and tell you everything herself. She wants to be honest with you, to stop hiding who she is. But I wanted to give you a heads up first, because what she's also planning to tell you is personal." Marcus looked up sharply. Personal how? Alexis smiled a genuine, almost amused smile. Riley has feelings for you, Marcus. Real feelings. She's been wrestling with them for weeks, trying to convince herself it's just gratitude or admiration or proximity. But after last week, she can't deny it anymore. She's falling for you. The room suddenly felt too small, too hot. Marcus's carefully ordered, predictable life was crumbling in real time. That's crazy, he stammered. We barely know each other. We've had maybe 10 conversations. She's a you said billionaire. And I'm just a guy who writes code in his apartment. Yes, and that's precisely why this matters to her, Alexis said gently. You're real, you're kind. You stood up for her when it mattered. And most importantly, you did it without knowing her last name or her net worth. After Alexis left, Marcus sat in his apartment for 3 hours, staring at the wall. Riley Morrison, billionaire heiress, the stressed-out woman in 4C who he'd shared maybe a dozen conversations with, was one of the wealthiest people in the country. It was absurd. It was impossible. And apparently, she had feelings for him. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from his sister. Dinner this weekend. You're being antisocial again. He couldn't even begin to think about how to respond to that. How do you text your sister back when you've just learned that your neighbor is secretly rich and apparently has a crush on you? That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind spiraling through a dozen different scenarios. What if this was all some elaborate joke? What if Alexis was scamming him? But no, he'd looked up Morrison Dynamics on his phone. It was real, very real. The company's website featured a photo of Jonathan Morrison, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. There was even an old photo of Riley from 5 years ago at some charity gala, wearing an evening gown and looking every inch the sophisticated heiress. She looked different in that photo, polished, confident, but also somehow hollow, like she was playing a part. The Riley he knew looked more alive, even with the stress and exhaustion. More real. But did he actually know her at all? Marcus thought about their few interactions. The way she'd always been kind, but guarded. The odd hours. The business calls through the walls. It all made sense now in a way that was almost terrifying. And the feelings thing. Marcus had noticed Riley, of course. She was beautiful, even exhausted. But he'd firmly kept her in the neighbor category in his mind. Thinking of her any other way had seemed pointless. She was dealing with obvious stress, and he was just the guy next door. But now everything was different. Did he have feelings for her too? He honestly didn't know. The attraction was there, sure, but everything was so complicated, so surreal. And what if she did come to his door tomorrow? What was he supposed to say? Marcus pulled out his phone and did something he rarely did. He called his best friend from college, Dave, at 2 a.m. This better be an emergency, Dave answered groggily. I think my neighbor might be a billionaire. And apparently she has feelings for me, Marcus blurted out. There was a long pause. Are you drunk? I wish, Marcus said. I'm dead serious. He spent the next hour explaining everything to Dave, who oscillated between disbelief and excitement. Dude, Dave finally said, this is literally a Hallmark movie plot. Except, real. What are you going to do? I have no idea, Marcus admitted. Part of me wants to just, I don't know, move to a different apartment complex. You can't be serious. I don't know how to handle this, Dave. What do I know about dating someone from that world? I drive a 10-year-old Honda. She's apparently worth billions. This is insane. Maybe that's exactly why it could work, Dave said thoughtfully. You're not from that world. She clearly doesn't want that world right now. That's why she's living in a normal apartment building instead of some penthouse. Marcus was silent, letting that sink in. Look, Dave continued, just hear her out tomorrow. Be honest. And remember, underneath all the money stuff, she's just a person. A person who, according to her lawyer friend, thinks you're pretty great. After hanging up, Marcus still couldn't sleep. He watched the sky gradually lighten through his bedroom window, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and possibilities. Wednesday arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle. Marcus worked from home as usual, but he couldn't concentrate. Every sound in the hallway made him jump, wondering if this was it, if Riley was coming to his door. She didn't come in the morning or the afternoon. By 5 p.m., Marcus had convinced himself that Alexis had been wrong, or that Riley had changed her mind. Maybe the whole thing had been a bizarre fever dream. Then at 6:17 p.m., his doorbell rang. Marcus's heart lurched into his throat. He stood up from his desk, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. Riley stood there, looking nervous. She was wearing jeans and a simple green sweater that matched her eyes. Her hair was down, slightly damp from the rain. She looked nothing like the polished heiress from the internet photos, and everything like the tired, real woman he defended in the hallway. Marcus opened the door. Hi, Riley said quietly. Her hands were clasped together, knuckles white. Can we talk? Yeah, Marcus said, his voice surprisingly steady. Come in. Riley entered, and for a moment, they just stood there in awkward silence. She looked around his apartment as if seeing it for the first time, even though she'd been there once before when she'd borrowed sugar. That memory felt like it was from a different lifetime now. I need to tell you something, Riley began, then let out a short, nervous laugh. Actually, I need to tell you several things, and I have no idea where to start. And I'm terrified you're going to think I'm crazy, or a liar, or... I know, Marcus interrupted gently. About who you are. Someone named Alexis came by yesterday. Riley's eyes widened in shock, then understanding dawned. Oh God, of course she did. Alexis always thinks she knows best. She covered her face with her hands. I'm so sorry, Marcus. I was supposed to be the one to tell you. I had this whole speech planned, and now you've known for a day, and this is such a mess. Hey, Marcus said softly, it's okay. Why don't you sit down? They sat on his couch, maintaining a careful distance between them. Riley took a deep breath. My full name is Riley Catherine Morrison, she began. My father owns Morrison Dynamics International. I grew up in a world of private jets, charity galas, and board meetings. I was 22 when my father announced that I would eventually take over the company. I spent the last decade preparing for that role, business school, working my way through different departments, proving myself over and over again. Her voice grew harder as she continued. But somewhere along the way, I realized I was suffocating. Every decision was made for me. Every relationship was scrutinized. People only saw the Morrison name, the money, the connections. I couldn't tell who actually cared about me versus who cared about what I could do for them. Riley looked down at her hands. 6 months ago, I broke. I walked out in the middle of a board meeting and just left. I found this apartment, rented it under my mother's maiden name, and tried to figure out who I am when I'm not Riley Morrison, corporate heir. That must have been terrifying, Marcus said quietly. It was, Riley admitted. It still is. My father keeps sending people to try to bring me back. Richard last week was just the latest attempt. They think I'm being childish, throwing a tantrum. They don't understand that I'm trying to save myself. She finally looked up, meeting Marcus's eyes. And then there's you. Marcus's heart rate quickened. You've been so kind to me, Marcus. Not because you knew who I was or wanted something from me, but just because you're a genuinely good person. When I moved in and you helped with my boxes, you didn't try to get my number or impress me. You just helped and went about your day. And when Richard was harassing me, you stepped in without hesitation. You had no idea if he was dangerous, but you stood up for me anyway. Riley's voice grew softer, more vulnerable. I've been trying to convince myself that what I feel is just gratitude, that I'm confusing appreciation with something else. But I can't lie to myself anymore. She took another deep breath. I have feelings for you, Marcus. Real, terrifying, inconvenient feelings. And I know this is completely unfair. We barely know each other. My life is a disaster. And I'm probably the last person you want to get involved with. But I needed to be honest with you. You deserve that much after everything. The silence that followed felt eternal. Marcus sat there, processing everything. Looking at Riley, really looking at her, he saw someone who was brave despite being scared. Someone who'd walked away from billions to find herself. Someone who looked at him with hope and fear in equal measure. Can I ask you something? Marcus finally said. Anything, Riley replied. If we tried this, whatever this could be, would it always be like this? Complicated, with your family trying to pull you back, with the money thing hanging over everything. Riley nodded slowly. Probably. At least for a while. I won't lie to you, my life is messy right now. I don't have easy answers about my future or what I want to do about the company. And if there was an us, the media attention would eventually happen. My family would interfere. It wouldn't be simple. Simple is overrated, Marcus said, surprising himself. I've had simple. My whole life has been simple, safe, predictable. And you know what? I was going through the motions. Wake up, work, sleep, repeat. He turned to face her more directly. But last week, when I saw that guy threatening you, I felt something I haven't felt in years. I felt like what I did mattered, like I mattered. Marcus took a chance and reached for her hand. Riley's fingers intertwined with his immediately, and he felt a spark of electricity at the contact. I don't know what this is, he continued. And yeah, you're right, we barely know each other. But I'd like to try knowing you, the real you, not the heiress, not the stressed out neighbor, but Riley. Just Riley. Tears were streaming down Riley's face now. Just Riley, she repeated softly. I'd really like that. They talked for 4 hours that night. Riley told Marcus everything about growing up in a mansion, but feeling lonely, about the pressure of expectations, about her mother, who died when she was 16, and how her father had poured all his grief and hopes into grooming Riley for succession. She told him about board members who dismissed her ideas, about ex-boyfriends who'd been more interested in the Morrison name than in her. Marcus shared his own story, growing up in a middle-class family. His parents' divorce when he was 12. His passion for coding that started as an escape and became a career. He told her about his failed relationships, his tendency to play it safe, his fear that he'd wake up at 60 and realize he'd never really lived. As the conversation flowed, something magical happened. They stopped being billionaire heiress and average guy. They became two people, finding genuine connection in the mess and uncertainty. Around 10 p.m., Riley's stomach growled loudly. They both laughed. When did you last eat? Marcus asked. Yesterday, maybe, Riley admitted sheepishly. Okay, that's unacceptable, Marcus declared, standing up. I make a mean grilled cheese. And before you say anything, yes, I know you probably have private chefs who can make 5-star meals. But my grilled cheese is made with love and mediocre cheddar, and it's non-negotiable. Riley laughed, really laughed, and the sound filled Marcus's apartment with warmth. Grilled cheese sounds perfect. They moved to his small kitchen. As Marcus cooked, Riley sat on the counter, swinging her legs like a kid, and they kept talking about movies, music, stupid jokes, childhood memories. The conversation was easy, natural, like they'd known each other for years instead of months. When Marcus handed her a slightly burnt grilled cheese sandwich, Riley took a bite and declared it the best thing I've eaten in months, which was probably a lie, but made him grin anyway. So what happens now? Marcus asked as they sat back on the couch with their sandwiches. Riley was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I don't know. I need to figure things out with my family eventually. but I'm not ready yet. And I don't want whatever this is between us to get caught up in that drama before we've even had a chance to see what it could be." "That's fair," Marcus said. "So we take it slow, get to know each other, date like normal people." "Normal people," Riley repeated with a smile. "I like the sound of that. Though I should warn you," Marcus added with mock seriousness, "I can't afford fancy restaurants on a software engineer's salary. Our dates might involve a lot of takeout and Netflix." "Marcus," Riley said, touching his cheek gently, "I've had fancy restaurants. I've been to exclusive clubs and private islands and galas where people spent more on flowers than most people make in a year. And I was miserable. Right now, in your apartment, eating a burnt grilled cheese. This is the happiest I've been in months." They kissed for the first time, then tentative at first, then deeper, both of them smiling against each other's lips. It tasted like cheddar and possibility. The next few weeks were simultaneously wonderful and complicated. Marcus and Riley started dating carefully, privately. They'd have dinner at each other's apartments, watch movies, take late-night walks in the rain when fewer people were around to recognize Riley. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Marcus learned that Riley was funny, genuinely, surprisingly funny. She had a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh until his sides hurt. She was also brilliant, with insights about business and technology that sometimes left him impressed and intimidated. Riley learned that Marcus was thoughtful in ways that mattered. He remembered small things she mentioned, her favorite tea, that she was afraid of thunderstorms, that she'd always wanted to learn guitar. He was patient with her mood swings when the stress of her situation got to be too much. But the complications were real. Riley's father started calling her more frequently, the pressure increasing. Board members reached out. Richard showed up one more time, though Marcus's presence made him leave quickly. The stress was taking its toll on Riley, and Marcus often felt helpless to ease it. Then there was the secrecy. Marcus couldn't tell his friends or family about Riley, not the whole truth. He hated lying when his sister asked if he was seeing anyone, hated the weird double life he was living. And there was the lingering question. What happened when Riley figured out what she wanted to do about Morrison Dynamics? Would she go back? Would that world pull her away from him? The turning point came 6 weeks into their relationship. Marcus came home from a rare in-office day to find Riley sitting outside his apartment door, her head in her hands. She'd been crying. "What happened?" Marcus asked immediately, unlocking his door and ushering her inside. "My father had a heart attack," Riley said, her voice hollow. "He's stable, but it was serious. He's in the hospital." And Marcus, her voice broke. "I don't know what to do." Marcus held her as she cried, feeling completely out of his depth. This was bigger than him, bigger than them. This was family, legacy, billions of dollars, and hundreds of employees whose livelihoods depended on Morrison Dynamics. You need to see him, Marcus said gently. Whatever issues you have with your father, if something happens and you don't go, you'll regret it forever. But if I go back, they'll never let me leave again, Riley whispered. They'll use this to manipulate me into staying, into taking over. I'll lose myself all over again. Then we'll figure it out together, Marcus said firmly. You go, you see your father, and I'll be right here when you need me. You're not alone in this anymore, Riley. You're allowed to have both, a relationship with your father and a life of your own. Riley looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. How are you so sure? I'm not, Marcus admitted. But I'm sure about you, about us. And I'm sure that you're strong enough to face this without losing yourself. Riley went to the hospital that night. Marcus didn't go with her. It wasn't his place, yet. But they texted throughout, and he stayed up late waiting to hear from her. At 2 a.m., his phone buzzed. My dad is okay. We talked, really talked for the first time in years. It's not fixed, but it's a start. Thank you for pushing me to go.